This is Freshly Pressed on the Smooth Breakfast on a Thursday morning, right here on Smooth 98.1. We love music and we definitely love life as well. It is 31 minutes past 7 a.m. And it's that time to take a look at the stories in the papers, the headlines, analysis, and your contributions as well. Welcome along to another amazing interactive session. So please do join us as you always do. WhatsApp is there, YouTube is there as well. The YouTube platform, you can find us at Smooth 981 FM Lagos. Smooth 981 FM Lagos. Get your front row seats there to enjoy the audio visual and leave your comments in the chat section there. Now on WhatsApp, the number is 0809 444 That's 0809 444 to send your messages on WhatsApp. Keep them short, keep them concise. Help me to help myself really to read your messages. And please stick to the subject matter that we are discussing today. That is how things are going to pan out. All right, joining me to take a look at the stories. It's a Thursday, so you already know it's going to be Mr. C and, of course, Gbubemi joining me in the morning. Good morning to you, gentlemen. Good to have you on the show as always.
Good morning, Ayo. Good morning, Mr. C. Good morning, Lagos.
Mr. C, good morning to you.
Good morning, Ayo. Good morning, Gbubemi. Good morning, Lagos.
All right, a couple of things that we're going to jump into this morning, and we shall begin our journey in the Vanguard newspaper. Still talking about the fallout from the revised visa reciprocity policy by the US. So we're going to begin our journey in that one. There's been, should I say, a response from the Nigerian government. Bimi, let's talk about this one. Let me just take a part of the story here to set the stage, really. The federal government has urged the United States to reconsider its revised visa reciprocity policy, which now limits Nigerian non-immigrant visas to single entry 3-month validity. The call is contained in a statement issued by Kimivi Ebienfa, the spokesperson to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The government expressed concern over the U.S. decision amidst partnership, cooperation, and shared global responsibilities by both countries. Okay, looking at this statement that has been made here, it would sound like on the Nigerian end, we were doing the same thing the US was doing before they revised the policy, but that wasn't exactly the case. Now we're asking them to revise this decision. Should this have even happened in the first place? I mean, I'm not saying that it's going to happen in the first place, but bearing in mind how things were and the fact that the US have said they're just reciprocating, more or less. Could this have been avoided? Probably. And is this the right response?
My thoughts exactly. Regarding the response, I'm a bit surprised. I don't want to say I'm shocked because this is not the response I was expecting to see. This statement alludes to the fact that Nigeria, had honored the principles of reciprocity. Part of the statement says, government views this development with concern and keen interest, particularly given the long-standing cordial relations and strong people ties between the two countries. The decision appears misaligned with the principles of reciprocity, equity, and mutual respect that should guide bilateral engagements between friendly nations. So this statement alludes to the fact that Nigeria was reciprocating, which means that we were giving US citizens 5-year visas, 5-year multiple entry visas as well. Now, the US in the statement, initially had said that based on their principles of reciprocity, they had revised our visa status or eligibility, or duration rather, to 3 months single entry,
right?
And they clearly said it was based on reciprocity. So that infers that what Nigeria was giving the US citizens was 3 months single entry. That's how I see it. And we've come from a journey where Nigerians, previously were issued 2-year multiple entry visas. This was increased to 5-year.
5 years, yeah.
Under President Buhari. And, I'm not quite sure, but I know that there had been quite a lot of discussions around reciprocity, especially during President Trump's first term. And based on that, that's what I think discussions, had gone ahead, which was why our visa status was increased to 5 years. So my assumption is that, US citizens must have also been eligible for that. So is it that something changed along the way? Did we downgrade US citizens visa validity to 3 months single entry? Or is it that we never even matched them in the first place? And the US is correcting that wrong now. All of these things, when we look at it, for me, it boils down to the fact that we don't appear to have a foreign policy, if a clear foreign policy or foreign right, direction in terms of foreign relations with any country. For example, we still do not have ambassadors in all of these countries all over the world. This is 2 years running. No ambassadors, so who is representing our interests? Who is putting forth our interests? We can't simply depend on whoever the highest official is in those locations because they are not charged with the powers and responsibilities of ambassadors. Now, even coming back home, looking at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs itself, and marrying that sort of like with the president. So a lot of people say, oh, but the president travels a lot, he visits all these countries, goes for all these international conferences, blah blah blah. Clearly, that is not solving anything. That's not addressing anything. On the back of this, we also recall that the UAE itself recently also revised their visa policies, and theirs is even much worse.
I was actually going to bring that to the table to ask Mr. C's opinion, but he'll still get his own 2 cents in.
Yeah,
since you've already mentioned UAE as well.
So theirs is even much worse. They've said that if you are, below a certain age, above
18 to 45,
yeah, you can't even apply. And then if you're above 45, you have to have a 6 month bank statement with a monthly end balance of $10,000 in equivalent currency and some other stringent requirements. So I mean that's not the kind of visa regime that the UAE operates with a lot of other countries, even within Africa. So what are we talking about? Sometimes I wonder, yes, we can see efforts of what the president is doing, blah, blah, blah. But are they doing the right things? Are they focusing on the right things? Are they clearly, spelling out what their expectations are regarding how foreign nationals or how foreign nations interact with Nigeria as a country, interact with Nigerian citizens? All of these things appear to be absent.
Mr. C, looking at what is going on here, I mean, with the US, with UAE, really close to each other in terms of the timelines. What exactly could be going on here? And could this also be the cue for a lot of other nations to say, hey, let's take a cue from what's going on right here. Let's also tighten our restrictions. Let's make it more difficult for Nigerians to come into our countries. Is there a possibility of this sort of thing happening?
Yes, there's always a possibility that this will happen. Now, we must remember that the fact that a car is moving, whether it's lurching from side to side or it's moving back in the opposite direction, doesn't exactly mean progress. Progress is only when you are headed in the right direction. Now, we must remember that right now, Nigeria really has no level in foreign affairs and the international community. The statement from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs clearly demonstrated a lack of understanding of why the American action was taken. It's not just the issue of reciprocity. There's the fact that they cannot even trust documents issued by the Nigerian government. Some Nigerians have been found to overstay their visas. There were a number of reasons. None of that was addressed. They go the begging route, Bambiala, and it beats my understanding. Do we not understand the process, the procedure, the game? The Minister for the Interior led a delegation, including the Comptroller General of the Nigerian Immigration Service, to a meeting with the American ambassador. For the love of heaven, how is the Minister of Interior leading a delegation to meet the ambassador? Where was the Foreign Affairs Minister? Where was the Minister of State for Foreign Affairs? Now, can you imagine a situation where the director of the CIA or the director of the FBI will carry themselves and go and meet the Nigerian ambassador in America? Oops, we don't have an ambassador. Now, all of this comes back home and addresses something squarely that we've been dealing with for the better part of 10 years. You will not have a strong voice internationally if you have a poor economy. It's not going to happen. Why are these measures not being extended to nationals from China, nationals from Japan, nationals from Russia. Remember that the citizens from these three countries I have named that have formed organized criminal groups within the United States. Yet there are no restrictions on visas from these countries. Furthermore, America will not try this with Saudi Arabia, will not try this with UAE. Again, Nigerians are poorly behaved. In the UAE, especially in Dubai, we've seen countless videos of Nigerian cultists openly fighting and maiming themselves on the streets of Dubai. So why does it come as a surprise that this is happening? The way forward for this is we need to improve our economy, we need to improve our self-worth, and that is when and only when the international community will take us serious. We should brace for more stringent measures because, again, remember there's this wave of nationalism sweeping across Western Europe and I'll say Northern America. So even Canada has started to tighten its immigration process. So at the end of the day, what is the take-home assignment for Nigerians? We need to stay home and make our country better. How do we do that? Part of the process is ensuring that riffraffs and scoundrels do not find their way into positions of power.
All right, Mr. C, thank you for that. But I'll still stay with you right now and move on to the next story here. We're taking this from the Vanguard. The federal government has secured a $747 million loan to finance phase one, section one of the Lagos Calabar Coastal Highway project stretching from Victoria Island to Eleko Village. The Ministry of Finance announced the development on Wednesday, disclosing that the facility was arranged by Deutsche Bank. According to a statement by the Director of Information and Public Relations, Mr. Mohammed Manga, the deal represents the largest syndicated road infrastructure loan in Nigeria's history.
Every time I hear about this project, I get even more confused. Now, we must take our minds back to when news about this project started filtering out and the Minister for Works continued to address Nigerians. There were concerns about how the contractor was selected and appointed. And I remember the minister clearly saying that this was an EPC plus financing deal. What is an EPC plus financing deal? It is an engineering, procurement, construction plus financing deal wherein the contractor is responsible for the entire project, including financing it. The Honorable Minister did go on to say that the federal government had provided its 30% portion of the funding requirements and that the contractor would sort out the rest, which is about 70%. Now, a few weeks ago, we were told the ECOWAS Bank had lent $100 million to Nigeria in respect of this project. Now we have a $747 million loan in respect of the same project. So the total money lent is $847 million. Now these monies are being lent to the federal government. If we're truly running an EPC plus financing deal, why is the federal government borrowing money? And if that is the portion of the federal government's funding requirements for a 47-kilometer stretch of road, it calls into question again, what exactly is going on? You cannot spend almost $1 billion to construct 47 kilometers of road, even if it is gold and titanium you're using to construct the road. Now, the bigger question is, how is this money going to be repaid? We don't know the terms of the financing deals. So clearly, we're looking at tolling or concessioning of the road. What will the rates be? How many Nigerians in the current economic climate can afford to pay those fees? And where transporters decide to use that route, guess what? The added cost is passed on to the consumer. And this will come in the form of higher transport costs. So where exactly are we going as a nation? Why is the National Assembly seemingly too quiet on this matter? Can we truly afford these loans? And why is no one investigating the cost of constructing this project? Because I remember that ECOWAS is constructing a superhighway from Lagos to Abidjan. which is about 10 times longer than this project. Or no, not 10 times, but it's longer than this project and at a reduced cost. So what exactly is going on? We have to salute Mr. Doherty, who is challenging the entire arrangement. His case was struck out at the High Court. He's filed an appeal. Let us hope there will be more clarity as it relates to this project. But all the hogwash of it shows renewed investor confidence in Nigeria. I'm not buying it. We simply do not understand what this project is about, why it's being done now, and also given the fact that there are other similar highways that have still not been completed, that are in poor condition, and continue to claim innocent lives on a daily basis.
All right, let me take a couple of WhatsApp messages before we continue on the conversation this morning. Let me see. This is ML. ML says, the analyst believes, I don't know which one of the two you're talking about. There are two of them in the studio. Believes the US over Nigeria. Did he check the facts? We offer two options: five-year multiple entry visas to US citizens and 3-month single entry e-visas. It's the e version that's 3 months. So how is reciprocity not honored? There is more to this beyond reciprocity.
I find it strange that the person who sent in that comment seems to know more than the United States government about what is going on. I just find it very strange. But again, what do I know?
Abayemi Marshall says, there is nothing inherently wrong with the Minister of Interior meeting with the American ambassador. In fact, such diplomatic engagements are standard practice in international relations, especially for a country like Nigeria that has multiple bilateral interests with the United States. All right, Abayemi, thank you for your message.
Again, the next comment displays a lack of understanding about how foreign relations are conducted. But again, what do I know?
Ajayi Oluniloa says, besides US, Canada and UAE have also announced some restrictions on visa issuance to Nigerians, even as the government continues to claim that its policies are beginning to yield positive results. Something is definitely not right. All right, let's go back to the stories here, and we're going to step right into the punch. Let's talk about the Lagos State LG polls that are coming up on Saturday. That's the 12th. The Lagos State Commissioner of Police, Mr. Olorundare Jimoh, has announced a 12-hour restriction on movement on Saturday across the states for the local government elections. He also ordered a massive deployment of personnel across the state. And he said the deployment was to ensure a hitch-free exercise. Now, having restriction of movement isn't exactly new when it comes to elections in Nigeria, but to the best of my knowledge, or should I say, if I think back, you usually have restrictions from about maybe 7 a.m. or thereabouts till about 4 p.m. during the elections, but this is from 3 a.m. to 3 p.m. on Saturday, 12 hours where nothing's going to, well, there's movement is restricted, as it were. Now, we've talked about these issues of restrictions of movement when it comes to elections and how that is not exactly the most viable option and so on and so forth. But could it just be because of the peculiarity of our climate here? And also the fact that he said the deployment was to ensure a hitch-free exercise. Do you need the police to ensure a hitch-free exercise when it comes to going to the polls?
Okay, so this timeline restriction, I'd say sort of like the pattern, because I remember the last time there was an LG election, was 2 years or 3 years ago, I can't quite remember. It was just about that. And my assumption is that, yes, peculiarity of our environment, but also the need to move materials, from the INEC offices, was the state INEC offices
to the
to all the
centers.
respective polling of and all of that. Also move the people as well, the electoral officers, along. Also to ensure that people vote within that time, condition and all of that. So this isn't like a full day restriction, which is what we, or almost a full day, which is what we typically have during, like the national elections. So like I said, so this is a peculiar situation because we still have to go physically to education to vote. Maybe perhaps if we also had e-voting as an option, there may not have been so much reliance on physical voting. One of the things that I'm concerned about is typically when it comes to state elections like this, and Lagos State is quite a hotbed. We saw what happened 2 years ago with the national elections. The threats of voter suppression, snatching of
Intimidation and all
ballot
that.
boxes. Exactly. So it's very, very important that we have these police officials, deployed across. My hope and expectation is that, if these nefarious activities, crop up, that they actually rise to the occasion and nip them in the bud. Unlike the situation that happened with the national elections, where in some cases, there were no police officers to be seen or they looked the other way, you know. Well, bearing in mind also that it doesn't quite appear as though publicity was very strong for this election, because I've heard quite a lot of people say, "Oh, I didn't even know there was any elections." I'm wondering what the turnout would be like, how many people would turn out. Our focus is always on, presidency, governorship, and all of that. We tend to forget the local government. So a lot of people just typically tend to sit down at home.
And that's a very important part of the electoral process.
Exactly. Also considering that the LGs have autonomy, so they have, you know, control over their resources. They have, and they're the first point of touch with the citizen at the grassroots level. Our expectations of them should increase much more. We should demand much more, be much more involved in the process of determining who even gets, to that office. So I do hope that the turnout will be impressive, wishes were horses, but you can only wish. And I do hope that we have a free and fair electoral process on the weekend.
Okay, so two things. Let me just throw in two things quickly. I've always pondered this question. There's always a restriction of movement on election day, and one of the reasons given is to provide security. But at certain points, there's a lot of violence inflicted, and then the policemen attached to each polling unit don't bear arms. So it's almost as if, so the thing is, you then ask, why are they there? Because they can't obviously do anything. Two, to the two gentlemen in the studio, are you planning to vote on Saturday? Because I've heard this talk of, oh, local government is the first point of contact. For me, there's no point of contact. I don't know who they are. I just know they exist somewhere.
It should be the first point of contact.
It should be, but sadly, they're not. So the question now is, since they are not, is there a plan to review the entire process? Because it's not just restricted to Lagos State. All over the country, they're virtually non-existent. They only come when they're collecting tolls or levies from market people and then collecting fines for one sundry offense or the other. The way the local government structure is presently set up, it's not serving Nigeria. So what is the point of elections which are poorly conducted, which are almost always boycotted by the other parties, and then the ruling party always wins everything on display? What's the point?
What I would say is that I think it's because a lot of people are not aware of the role and responsibilities of the LG. So they don't demand as much, which is why, I said initially our focus is always on governorship or the presidency. When we complain about the country,
But then,
typically we'll talk about.
But then, whose fault would you say that is?
Well, we all have to share the blame, to be honest. That's just the truth. In terms of, okay, so now we're having local government elections. So at the very least, the curious mind would ask, what is a local government? How is that compared with the state or the nation? What is the role of a local government chairman or a council or a ward chairman, all those things, And then there's also, the part of orientation from the agents, relevant government agencies that should actually educate people about things like this.
All right, let me take a message or two before we dive back into excuse me, before we dive back into the conversation. Rexin Surulere says visas are now an ego trip. 2 weeks ago, we must have had a great economy with very high standings in the international community. Guys, it's just visas, it's conditions. Its conditions change like the weather. Let's talk about what really moves the needle for us. Okay, Rexy. Bryce Danukuda says, I hope local government elections in Lagos will be free and fair. Let the people determine who govern them. All right. Okay, let me go back into the stories. I'll come back to the messages before we wrap it up. All right, Mr. C, let us take a walk into, where are we going to? We're going to Oyo State, and this is coming from The Guardian. Interesting things going on. The Oyo State has approved the acquisition of 2 surveillance aircraft aimed at improving law enforcement operations and addressing ongoing security challenges, including illegal mining and kidnapping. Because of time, Mr. C, I'll just let you dive right into this one and make sense of it.
Okay, so very quickly, I read the story and I had mixed feelings. So there's a positive side, and I have some questions. The positive side is the government is taking proactive steps to address the issue of insecurity that is largely a national problem. And given the fact that Oyo State is about 28,000 square kilometers in size, it makes sense for it to get surveillance aircraft. Now, the Commissioner for Information did come out to say that approval had been given to buy 2 aircraft, and he specified the model DA42MNG. Now, the sad thing with this story is no timeline was given for the expected arrival of the aircraft and when the aircraft will be used. Now, he quoted a very interesting sum as the cost of acquiring the 2 aircraft, and he said it's about 7.76 billion naira. Now, including custom duty, which they shouldn't pay, in my opinion, including the cost, I find that a bit strange because I had to go online to do some research. The most expensive version of this aircraft, which incidentally is not the one your state government is getting, is about $1.2 million. So there's a sum of 3.5 to about 5 billion that readily cannot be explained depending on the models they're getting. So the question is this: why is the aircraft costing so much? Why are you paying duty? Why can't you apply for a duty waiver since it's an arm of government buying it? 2, how about the cost of getting the pilots in, training them, looking after them, and then the cost of C checks? Where will you do the C checks for the planes? So there's still many questions around this. I believe the commissioner made a mistake with the amount he cited as a cost of acquisition. And if he's correct, the Oyo State House of Assembly has to ask more questions because those aircraft are not that expensive, even when you convert at the prevailing exchange rate. So many, many questions. Hopefully, we may get some answers soon.
Hopefully, we may get some answers, and hopefully being the key word. Okay, let me see who's talking to us here. This is from, okay, is there a name attached to it? Like I said, once again, the WhatsApp has been kind of funny, so the names are not attached to the numbers. Okay, there's no name attached to the message. It says, when you take a loan, shouldn't you also tell us how you intend to pay it back? How long will it take? Mr. C, do you have any ideas? Baffles me how a road is more important than urgent projects, health, education, security, and so on and so forth. Biomi says, Mr. C is very wrong talking about not voting on radio. It's his duty to know his leaders and not the other way around. The FG has fought for LG autonomy. What has happened? Will you accuse the federal government for that as well? This is, let me see here. Z-Man from Bristol says, the police don't just look away or are nowhere to be found during elections. Most times they collude in election rigging and ballot snatching. I beg, make we try to talk the whole truth. We shall speak only the truth that we are very much aware of, Z-Man. You know, that's how it's supposed to be. Okay, this is Dapo in Lagos says, I checked on cost of road construction, and World Bank average is $949,000 per kilometer, which is 1.4 billion naira per kilometer. That's according to Dapo here, and according to his own research.
So what's the relevance of that research? Did he tie to the story? Is he saying that the federal government spending on road construction is in line with conventional international practices? So I'm not sure what that figure means. But I invite anyone to take a comparative cost analysis of road construction within the African continent, and you will find out that road construction in Nigeria is typically more expensive. Go back the last 15, 20 years.
Emeka Inikeja says, Oyo State and aircraft, let it not be like our Tucano jets that will never be useful at the end of the day. And okay, who's talking to us here? Okay, I didn't take this one before from Abami. It says a government can borrow to fund an EPC, that's engineering, procurement, and construction contract. And in fact, this is a common global practice, especially for large-scale infrastructure projects such as roads, railways, bridges, power plants, and refineries as well.
So I think we should stop this nonsense that some people are bent on doing. What is being done in Nigeria is an EPC plus F. What he's talking about is completely different. So don't bring something different and try to present it as what is actually going on. What I spoke to was EPC plus F, because that is what the Honorable Minister did inform Nigerians about.
Okay, let me see. Can I squeeze one more in? Because we really have to call it a morning on the show. Okay, let me take one more. Ibu Queen Ketu says, God bless Mr. C. What is the economic justification for this Lagos coastal road? The option for the visas does not mean it's being practiced. The federal government should have the figures and speak to the reciprocating or the reciprocity of the former U.S. policy, I guess is what you're trying to say in that message. Thank you for sharing your thoughts there. And thank you so much for all the messages. And of course, making it a very lively morning on Freshly Pressed. As always, very much appreciated. Thank you to you, Mr. C, and Gbubemi for joining me, as you always do.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Have yourselves a great Thursday morning. Looking forward to the weekend as well. And thank you once again. Keep it tuned to the Smooth Breakfast. It's going to be all about entertainment and so much more in the Grapevine at 8:15.
The headline, the story, the cue.